and welcome to Let's Collaborate, a podcast from the Southwest Doctoral Training Partnership. I'm your host, Catherine McDonald, and joining me for this episode is Max Guarini, who's researching the visual construction of Jeremy Corbyn in the British media. Yep. So, first of all then, tell me a little bit more about your research.
Yeah, so basically I look at how Jeremy Corbyn was visually constructed in a negative sense in the British media. So some research is focused on the more positive aspects of the coverage. So, for example, the kind of stuff that we saw on social media in 2017, lots of memes that were published, to sort of in support of Corbyn. But I'm looking at the negative stuff across different types of media. So this includes, legacy media, what we think of newspapers, both in print and online, but also how those images travel across the media, from old media to new media and vice versa.
And when you talk about the visual construction, are you literally talking about his image, how his image was used, or is it more complex than that?
No, it's basically how visuals were used, right? So photographs are the main things I look at. Those were used to sort of create this image of him as dangerous through different kind of themes. But yeah, that's basically it. So it's kind of focused on the visual aspect.
And what made you want to look into that?
A couple of things, really. I suppose one of the reasons was I kind of lived through the period in question, right? So I look at the time from 2015 to 2019, which were the years he was Labour leader. Having lived through that time, I noticed people really engaging in politics a lot more. People suddenly who I knew were completely, uninterested in politics suddenly became quite active, especially younger people. And I thought it was a real exciting time, right? Because it was something different. So whether you agree with his ideas or not, then, at least we can all agree on the fact that he did represent something quite unique. And so, to sort of look at how the media responded to that, I thought was really interesting. The visual aspect is because I suppose I find a lot of people are kind of overloaded these days with information, from different sources. Most of us have smartphones, we're constantly getting different information coming through. So images actually serve as what we call a kind of cognitive shortcut, right? So they kind of cut through all the noise and they go, look, here's an image of this guy. So whether you believe the words that we write or not, here's an image, right? It can't be false, right? So images have this power that is quite persuasive, I would say.
And talk us through the methodology that you've used in this research. How have you actually gone about it?
So I use something called discourse analysis. So people think of discourse as usually being about language only. But actually, discourse includes any kind of communicative act, right? So any kind of meaningful communication, whether it be through words, images, music, architecture, is all part of discourse. So I basically look at the images and I try to look at the different signs or different signifiers in those images and how they're trying to persuade me of something. So what kind of work is this picture doing to convince me of the message?
And ultimately, what do you hope your research will inform or change? What would you like to see it achieve?
Well, I think first and foremost, I think it's important that we see images as deeply political, right? So I think it's important that we think about how photographs or pictures are used rather than just as something which reflects the real world. They actually construct the world, right? And so we have to think about how images are basically kind of imbued with power. Why are they chosen? Why are they shown at certain times? As I say, people often think as images as just showing the world, but there's lots of choices along the way from that image being taken to them being selected, to them being edited a certain way, to them being shown in a certain format and with certain words next to them, right? So all these choices matter. So I'd like to see more of a focus, let's say, on the visual aspect of politics. And I think that's happening across other disciplines. But in British politics especially, I don't think that's been deeply explored. So that's one aspect. And obviously, the second aspect which follows from this one is how does the visual affect our democracy, right? If the media is able to construct someone as dangerous, what does that say about the health of our democracy, right? If someone comes along and has radically different ideas and is then labelled or constructed as dangerous, in the case of Corbyn, for example, what does that do for, I suppose, in Corbyn's case, the future of the left in Britain, right? What does that say to people who perhaps now are even too young to know anything about politics, but in 10, 20 years' time, will look back at this time and kind of be scared of, let's say, promoting left politics in the UK because they've seen what happens, right? As I say, regardless of whether you agree with Corbyn's ideas, I think it's important that we have a plurality of ideas, that we have different sort of voices in society. And it's important that those voices get a fair hearing, I would say, right? So I think it has implications both from a sort of a pedagogical point of view and how we think about educating young people to critically engage with images, but also to think about how that affects our democracy.
And also, I guess, to expose the or to raise the awareness in us as consumers of the media about the choices that are being made that we then consume, I guess, subconsciously.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've hit on an important point there, I think, because as I said before, these images do serve as cognitive shortcuts, right? Even if, for example, we don't buy a particular newspaper, we are likely to see them just walking past a newspaper stand in a supermarket, or if someone leaves it behind in a cafe or on a bus or on the train. Those front pages still matter, right? People talk about the revolutionary change from new media, but there's lots of good research out there showing that actually legacy media still really matter. They're still powerful. News organizations have a wide reach thanks to their online presence as well. So, I think there is potential in new media to sort of counteract some of or let's say counter the mainstream narratives on certain things. But at the same time, we also have to be aware of the fact that there are still very powerful forces at play in what we see, how we see it, how, let's say, our political world is constructed. So yeah, I think it's important to reflect on those points, right? Yeah.
It sounds absolutely fascinating, and I wish you all the best with it.
Thank you.
Before I let you go, though, what advice would you give to someone who's thinking about embarking on a PhD?
I'd say do it if you get the chance to do it. I've been very fortunate. I was funded from the Southwest Doctoral Training Partnership, so I was lucky to be able to actually do the PhD. So if you have a passion for something, I would say follow it, do it. Be brave in terms of what you do and how you do it and what you say. And don't be afraid to disrupt, to rock the boat and to try and change things for the better, or to try and bring new insights into things, right? And to do that, I think you have to be brave. I'm not saying I am. I try to be.
Max, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks to you for listening to this episode of Let's Collaborate from the Southwest Doctoral Training Partnership. This was produced in collaboration with Research Podcast and recorded at the SWDTP Conference in 2023. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you receive your podcasts.